Campaign 2018 is sponsored by Wisconsin Hospital Association, Wisconsin Counties Association, Wisconsin Realtors Association, Marshfield Clinic Health System, AARP Wisconsin, and Campaign 2018 partner Milwaukee Journal-Sentinel.
Gabriel Gomez of Milwaukee is a Democratic candidate in the 21st Assembly District. The election is November 6th. Gabriel, welcome to WisconsinEye.
Thank you. Thank you for the invitation.
You identify three major issues. Let's work them. Education, ending gun violence, equality, and fair play. Let's start with education. Are public schools underfunded, Gabriel?
100%. To me, education is the number one, the baseline of success of a community, right? And public education has been a humongous growth engine for the United States, historically speaking. Mm-hmm. And so the funding that we've seen from the administration over the last 8 years or so has absolutely put education under attack.
Do you want to go back to the 2/3 level that I think Mr. Evers faces?
I would support Tony Evers' proposal for sure, where I would like a little bit more funding as when it comes to the area of special education. Those children need more assistance, and they tend to cost a little bit more to the school system. So we need to make sure that we take care of them as well.
School choice, school vouchers started in Milwaukee, expanded to Racine, and now they're statewide. Do you have a position? Do you support the voucher program?
I think the only thing that the school voucher program has proved conclusively is that well-funded schools perform well. And if we live in an area where a budget is tough and we need to make tough decisions, it doesn't make any sense for me to create a duplicate school system. So no, I think we need to slowly phase away the school voucher system, return that funding into the public school, make sure that the public schools that we do have work.
Now, you say on your website that your son attends MPS.
No, South Milwaukee.
South Milwaukee.
Correct. Okay.
My question is, the four-year graduation rate in MPS is about 60%. Any thoughts on how Milwaukee could improve that graduation rate?
So funding is only one leg of that stool, I believe. I think when you look at education, there's so many other factors that go in, which is the conditions at home, what that child had for breakfast that day, so many other environmental factors. So school funding and having proper class sizes and having good teachers is only one part of it. I think the other part of it for sure is we work with this community that's really underserved and make sure that those children get a proper home setting, in the sense of that they have a good meal, that they have the ability to reach for books and for Wi-Fi and for all the other conditions that matter for a good education. Okay,
and the other central part of your two other issues, changing gun laws.
Yes.
And you have a rather comprehensive, several steps you'd make in changing gun laws. You want to talk about the 2 or 3 foremost important changes you'd like seen made?
So to me, these are combined with education, right? The idea of providing a safe community, it matters, right? So right now, I believe the rate is something like 8 children die every day from the weapon they have at their own house, right? So to me, gun ownership at the highest level, we need to talk about responsible ownership and responsible selling of weapons. So we're talking about closing background checks, loopholes. We're talking about the strawman purchases, closing those availabilities. And we're talking about training and proper gun ownership. I'm a Marine. I believe in the Second Amendment. I believe in the Constitution. So I don't think any of these things infringe on the one's right to own a weapon. What we need to do is support proper selling of weapons, responsible selling, and responsible ownership.
And then the third campaign theme is equality and fair pay. You'd like to see an increase in the minimum wage to what?
Absolutely. So I think, again, all these campaign issues, I think, mount up to higher quality of life for Wisconsinites, right? And they're all really tied in. I don't think any one of these issues is separate of the other in many areas. So when it comes to minimum wage, the number out there, the 5 for 15, I think is a beginning point for me. Okay. It just doesn't make any sense that we live in a country where we have billionaires and there's people that have to have 2, 3, 4 jobs just to make ends meet, right? The average Wisconsinite would have to work 20,000 years to make $1 billion. Just that number just is mind-blowing to me, right?
The tax benefit, the tax break package for Foxconn has prompted Kimberly-Clark to seek some of the same tax breaks. Yeah. What's your position on both Foxconn and Kimberly-Clark?
I have a little bit of business background, right? And just from a strict business investment, when entrepreneurs look to make an investment, they look for a return on investment in about 3 to 5 year range. So just on that metric alone, that investment we made in Foxconn doesn't make any sense, right? It's $3 billion over the next 20 odd some years. In best case scenario, we get our money back. I think one could make an argument to make the 13% of people in Wisconsin that are living on the poverty line, give them $20,000 a year for the next 20 years, and we spend about 1/10 of that $3 billion, right? And talk about economic growth there. Now, obviously, that's a far-fetched idea, but I'm just making it as a contrast, right? $3 billion without any real guidelines, any real limitations of what that money goes and what that money does that just doesn't make any sense. One of my favorite lines is from John Oliver, who a few months ago made a show on economic incentives, tax incentives. And I think it's appropriate. He says, because we don't put any limitations, because we essentially give businesses money and say good luck, it's essentially the business equivalent of a wishing well. You just throw money down the hole and hope for the best. I can't support that.
And you're also against the Kimberly-Clark tax breaks, correct?
So that was a brand new one. I have not seen the details around that one. I have to study it more to give you
I understand. The impasse in the Capitol, the gridlock over how we pay for highways, how would you like to see it resolved? What any tax increases you could support to raise revenues?
The issue with highways and the infrastructure in general, again, I think we've made so many investments in the state that are the equivalent of the field of dreams. If this whole supply side economics, and if you build it, they'll come. So as if magically the 1990s White Sox were going to show up and make everyone happy. Economics professors speak about supply and demand side, right? And so we need to be able to not just help businesses grow in Wisconsin, which obviously we need to do, but we also need to help the people in Wisconsin be able to afford things and afford living. To me, that's the part of the economics that we've ignored over the last 15, 20 years, probably longer if we talk about trickle-down economics. So we need to change the incentives to help people stay in Wisconsin, to help people spend money in Wisconsin and buy houses in Wisconsin. That would create the tax revenues we need to fix roads instead of, again, cutting everywhere, cutting taxes everywhere where it's a social benefit, putting that money towards corporate goodwill. We need to change the values of Wisconsin and make it so it's people-friendly. Walker, one of his first campaign things was Wisconsin is open for business. What we weren't told is what's for sale is our water, our air, our tax dollars as a taxpayer, and our well-being. I don't think that's a bargain that people in Wisconsin agree to make anymore.
So at this point, you're not convinced that we need an increase in the gas tax, and how do you feel about the tolling idea that surfaces in the Capitol?
The issue with tolling, again, I have to investigate more. I know that I don't want to privatize the roads. To me, that doesn't make any sense. The moment you add that profit incentive, we start paying for CEO salaries and still paying for roads, right? So I think we do need to look at the roads and see if we can do somewhat of an increase in the gas tax. The reason I say that it's not just for the roads, it's also an environmental issue as well. At the end of the day, we just had the report that come out. If we don't make significant changes by 2030, there'll be irreversible changes to the climate, right? So we need to put incentives for public transportation and other modes of transportation that have health benefits and environmental benefits and the revenue benefits.
Local governments have lived with levy limits to control property taxes for 14 or 15 years. Some local government leaders say that hurts their ability to provide local services. You think we ought to keep levy limits to hold down property taxes, or loosen them, or get rid of them?
Loosen them at the very least. This is probably the number one thing I hear when I met with local leaders, mayors and city clerks. This is their number one concern, is the levy limits. I think it's ironic that the party that talks about local decision making has taken it away from city leaders and local leaders. So at the very least, we need to loosen them, if not eliminate them altogether.
Big debate in the next budget over whether we need a new prison. Some Democratic candidates for governor said if we emphasized rehabilitation, we could cut the population in half. 2 of our prisons were built in the 19th century. Do you think we need a new prison?
I think we need a whole new paradigm on how we handle our criminal system. No, I don't think we need new prisons. A lot of the people we have in jail right now are there for non-violent offenses. If we look specifically about the issue of marijuana users that are in jail, it's a huge amount of the population that if we legalize now, and we can get rid of that prison population. And on top of that, we call it the correction facilities. We're not doing anything to correct. And if anything, we're taking those people out of the public, out of their families, the things that keep them grounded into our community, and then expect them to magically change. We need to change how we look at prison reform and make sure that we actually are doing corrections and doing things at that level to incentivize changes in behavior, not just put people away and kind of throw away the key. So.
You support then legalizing both medical and recreational marijuana?
Yes, absolutely.
UW system budget, we've had a freeze on resident undergrad tuition for 6 years. Should the freeze continue for a 7th and 8th year?
I'm sorry, for UW?
Yeah, for the UW system schools.
Again, I think when we look at the budget and prioritize education, I'm not sure how that's going to work with that's again a topic I'll need a little bit more education on, but we need to make education affordable across the state, right? So that means not just necessarily UW, looking at MATC, and also incentivize children to go into the trades. You can go get a real good job, a job that is in construction or plumbing or electricians, where you get an apprenticeship and don't go into debt into going to school. And again, to me, it's the philosophy out of the state legislation not to be making middle class life affordable. So however we can do that to prioritize our spending to that way, those are the sort of the issues I'd be supporting.
I'm sure when you meet with voters in the 21st district, you hear about health care. What are your thoughts on next steps in health care, both in an urban area like Milwaukee and rural Wisconsin, sir?
Indeed, health care is probably the number 1 or number 2 issue I hear on doors, depending on the doors I'm knocking on. It's obviously extremely personal, right? I think we need to figure out as a state how we take care of our people. So I'm all for expanding Badger Care. I think another issue that ties into health care is retirement income. So I'm also in for expanding the Wisconsin retirement system to the private sector as well.
You are. To give private sector workers an option to join the state pension system. Thank you for clarifying.
Thank you. And allow people to opt into Badger Care, take that federal money to lower the cost.
Have you heard from hospitals, nursing homes, and other medical providers that Wisconsin's Medicaid reimbursement rates are too low, and that we may be hitting a tipping point in terms of those low reimbursement rates threatening the quality of care under our Medicaid program? Has that come up?
I've not had that conversation yet, no. Okay. But I can see why that's a real concern. Again, I think if we can bring in more people into the system, and not just healthcare users, but train more nurses, train more doctors, train more practitioners, I think that can help revitalize that system.
Okay. Have you followed a pilot program between state government and Delta Dental that provides dental care to low-income residents in some regional clinics? Are you aware of that?
You're not aware of that program, no.
Have you talked to any caregivers? AARP says that 578,000 Wisconsin residents are caregivers for a family member or a neighbor. And my question is, would you support laws or rules that require hospitals to recognize and work with family caregivers when a loved one is hospitalized? Has that issue come up?
I've spoken with a couple, actually, a woman that is a dental hygienist. And the idea of healthcare has come up. Again, another woman that is taking care of her, or was taking care of her ailing mother. Mm-hmm. So again, this is very much a kitchen table issue for a lot of Wisconsinites. Okay. I think we need to absolutely support caregivers at home. The facts are that when somebody receives a proper support at home, they have better healthcare results, and it's cheaper healthcare. So I think this ties in, generally speaking, to care providers, all the way from kindergarten parents, all the way up to adults taking care of their older parents. We've devalued those roles in our society, and we need to do things to support them. And again, the reality shows that once somebody gets a proper care in their own home, the health results are better.
And you want to highlight differences between you and the incumbent that you're challenging on November 6th?
Unfortunately, I think my incumbent's only claim to fame is supporting the voucher system for schools. And I think I spoke about that already, which is I don't agree with it. I think we already have choice in Wisconsin. People who want to take their kid. If you live in Green Bay and you want to take your kid to school in Madison, that's fine. You already have that choice within the public school system. I don't think we need to create a duplicate system for funding that takes away money from public schools into a private institute that doesn't have the guards that a public school has, and doesn't have the regulations. And in fact, we've seen many private so-called providers of education take the money, take the vouchers, and as soon as the enrollment period is over, close doors and leave the state, and then send those kids right back to the public school system. So I think that, to me, is the number one difference. Another issue where I'm very much disappointed is part of the reason why I chose to get into this race is my opponent's lack of voice on immigration. She herself came to the U.S., as I recall, on asylum, and unfortunately has been silent when it comes to what we've been doing in the U.S. at the federal level and at the state level to support the immigrant community. I came to the U.S. myself when I was 12 years old. I was fortunate that I came here with documentation. The company my dad was working for did the visa for us. But I'm still very much aware of the difficulties of being marginalized as a newcomer to this country. And I think Jessie, with her position and power, should have been a whole lot more vocal in supporting the immigrant community and standing up to the people that say immigrants are somehow criminals or somehow a drain of the economy.
Thank you. Gabriel Gomez of Milwaukee is the Democratic candidate in the 21st Assembly District. The election is November 6th. Gabriel, thanks for talking to WisconsinEye.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you.
Campaign 2018 is sponsored by Wisconsin Hospital Association, Wisconsin Counties Association, Wisconsin Realtors Association, Marshfield Clinic Health System, AARP Wisconsin, and Campaign 2018 partner Milwaukee Journal-Sentinel.